Another month has flown by. So let's talk about what I read this month. The first book we read was Their Monstrous Hearts by Yigi Turahan. I'm not quite sure how to say that name. I do apologize. This book is about there's this guy, he's an aspiring author, but he's had super writer's block. And he finds out that his grandmother has died and he's inherited her estate and her butterfly collection, but he's being stubborn and doesn't really want to go. And eventually he sucks it up and he goes. The day that his grandmother had died was kind of weird. Like she had come home and she sees like all these people standing around filming, and then like she sees all these butterflies everywhere. She screams, "This can't be happening." And then like there's butterflies pouring out of her greenhouse. There's a big hole in there, and then she dies that day. Doesn't say how she dies or what happened, but she does. This book is super weird. I enjoyed 90% of the book, but the ending for me, I did not like. I really did not like the ending, like, which was a bummer because 90% of the book was great. It's a super weird story with like weird lore and strange creatures and just like effed up stuff that happens, but in the end, the ending just kind of, I didn't enjoy it. But that's just me. Other people might have liked it. So after that one, I read a gem, and that is Harriet Tubman live in concert by Bob the Drag Queen. Wow, it's so flipping good. It's like this unassuming book, right? You're like, well, that sounds interesting. Harriet Tubman live in concert. So the Great Awakening has happened, and different people from history have come back. And Harriet Tubman is one of them. She's got her band together. She wants to put out an album and then go on tour and share her story, share her story of setting people free and how she couldn't enjoy that freedom unless everybody was free. And that was like her life's work. You get into the story, and it follows this character, Darnell, who the good God above has told Harriet that Darnell is the one who's going to produce her album and take them out on tour. And you get to see like what Darnell's life has been like up until this point. Like he was doing really well as a producer, but then he was outed before he was ready. I think this was like maybe it was in the 90s that happened. But him and this other musician were supposed to come out together, but then that musician kind of screwed him over, and then he was outed, and then his career kind of like went weird and spiraled. And so then he was just making his money doing like jingles and stuff. But then Harriet Tubman comes in. She's like, "Hey, God told me you're the one to help us do this." And he's like, doesn't want to tell Harriet freaking Tubman that he doesn't believe in God, or he doesn't know what he believes, because it's Harriet Tubman and that's like his idol. So he's very excited to work with Harriet. And you get to meet all the different members of her band, and they tell you their stories about being enslaved and what had happened and when Harriet set them free. And just when they would talk to him and be like, what do you do with all this freedom? And he's kind of like, oh, I never really thought about it. But then Harriet's like, I know you got something too that's bringing you down. You're not free, and I want to set you free. And his thing is he's afraid to tell her that he's gay because she's super into God, and like a lot of time religious people aren't the most accepting because they can't think outside of their little box. It's such a beautiful story. It's sad, it's emotional, it's gripping, it's wonderful. Bob knocked it out of the park. The writing is fantastic. Like, I can't recommend this book enough. It's amazing. All right. After that one, we read The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door by H.G. Perry. This is a fantasy. It's a dark academia, and it follows the main character. They are this farmer peasant girl. Her brother comes back from the war at the time, and it turns out he was cursed by a fairy. And so part of his body is like gray and bark, and they were able to stop the curse, but it seems like maybe it only really slowed it down, and it will slowly work its way to his heart, eventually killing him. This is how the main character finds out that magic exists, but that basically rich people have been trying to hide magic from the peasants and all the rest of society and whatnot. But this girl finds out, and she's like, I want to go to this magical college because this guy that was in the war with her brother who had saved him, he talks to her and he's like, well, there is a scholarship, but you'd have to do better than any of these other people da 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 da. And he's like, well, okay, I know a witch that you can train with, and maybe she can help you out for that. And then we'll see, what happens. And so she works her butt off and she gets into that school. And then when she gets there, everyone, like when they find out who she is, that she's like the scholarship witch, they're all like rich, snooty kids and they look down their nose at her. Until that is, she meets this one boy who he is super wealthy, but he sees that she's reading a particular author and he takes an uncanny interest in her because she seems to be interested in the Fae. And all fairy stuff has kind of been banned because of what had happened in this war. And so they're not supposed to look into that. You can't really study it. It's not a subject of study in school. And so she starts hanging out with this guy and then his group of friends, and they might start experimenting around with like the Fae and stuff like that. And she wants to save her brother, so she's trying to find a cure for that as well. What are the motives, though, of these other people that are suddenly having her come into their group? Well, you'll have to read the book to find out. I thought it was pretty fantastic. I really enjoyed it. After that one, I read an awesome 80s horror that had to do with an arcade game, and that was called Palibius. There was a whole urban legend surrounding this video game, too, that I didn't even know about until, like, I had made a short about this book and someone told me about it in my comments and I was like, oh, no kidding. I didn't know that was an actual urban legend. So the urban legend was that there was these games, and this was in like Oregon, called Palibius, and they put them around at different arcades, and supposedly it was like a psyop thing from the government. And then occasionally like the Men in Black would come and like collect data from these video games, seeing how it affected the psyche of people and whatnot. I don't know. That's a whole urban legend about that. And then the games mysteriously disappeared and were never heard of again. And so this book is a horror book based on that lore. So follows this character. Her name is Andy. She works in an arcade and she wants to be a computer engineer. Her boss is cheap, he's gross, he sells drugs out the back door, he's lecherous. When she tells him about the fact that you can get like arcade games on auction, well, that's going to save him some money. So he buys random ones and he ends up buying this Palibius game. And at the time, it's the 80s. That's the days of Atari and Pong. And so stuff is not the best graphics, but they see Palibius, and Palibius is like the best graphics they've ever seen. And it's almost mesmerizing, the effect it seems to have on people and the people that play the game. And these effects, like people start to have weird hallucinations, they become very violent, and it seems to accelerate over time. And by the time anyone figures out that the video game is the source of it, it might be too late. I have a standalone review for this if you want to hear more specifically about that. I will link that down below. It's a great freaking book. It's so weird. All right, so after that one, I read Blackwoods Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivy. This is like a dark fairy tale. It takes place in the Alaskan wilderness. It follows this girl, Birdie, and her 6-year-old daughter. Birdie does not make the best life choices. I liked the story of this book, but the main character drove me insane. She's horrible. Anyways, the story is, you come into it, she's at work, she gets wasted, she's doing cocaine in the bathroom, she goes home, she has a 6-year-old daughter staying in the cabin alone. She gets home and then she wakes up the next day, leaves her daughter there, and decides to go fishing. Okay, and then her daughter wakes up and is freaking out like, where's my mom? And her daughter takes off into the woods to go and try and find her. And while the mom's out, she runs into this guy, Arthur, who everyone thinks is kind of weird, and he's missing an ear and he has like some deformity that looks like he was scarred from a fight or something that happened. He doesn't really talk about it, and he's strange in how he speaks in his words and whatnot. When she gets back, she discovers her daughter's missing, and she starts freaking out. But then eventually Arthur comes and has the daughter and reunites the mom and the daughter, and they're okay. But the boss at her job is like, you're going on day shifts, no more night shifts for you, which is for the best because she can't be partying at work, especially when she has a 6-year-old daughter. All right, so then Arthur starts coming around, the guy from the woods, and he is weird, but very polite and kind. And eventually they kind of like start to have this relationship. But the thing about Arthur is, well, and I think most of the people in the town area kind of know, but she doesn't. And even there was at this party, one of the people was trying to tell her about him, and she just wasn't getting it. The thing about Arthur is that he might be a bear, like a bear from the forest, like a shapeshifter. And it's a weird and dark story, and I like the story a lot. I just did not necessarily like the main character and her decisions. But overall, it was pretty decent. So after that one, I read Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. Holy crap, what a horror book. So you follow the main character, Cora. Her and her sister had been living in New York. One day they were waiting for the train. This is when COVID first kicked off. And Cora witnesses her sister being pushed in front of the train by some white guy. She couldn't really see him. He had a hood on, he had a mask on, and he screamed Bat Eater when he pushed the sister in front of the train. Not too long after this, Cora decides to become a crime scene cleaner. I mean, why wouldn't you after seeing that? Okay, that part didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, why? What the F? You're like, well, I can handle seeing that. I can handle more of it. Anyways, that's what she ends up doing. But she ends up having a strange camaraderie with the people she ends up working with. And they become somewhat friends. Though, as they do their jobs, they keep ending up at places where Asian women have been murdered. And at each crime scene, they keep finding these bats with shredded wings. And they're like, this is obviously the work of a serial killer. And everything's being hushed up by the cops. They try to go to the press. The guy ends up being like, I could be arrested for printing the story. They won't let me. And so it seems like there's a whole political cover up of all of this. Because instead of that story being printed, they printed a story instead about how safe everything is and how crime has gone down when it had gone up exponentially. So you have that. And so they start digging into it themselves to try and find the serial killer. But then also, Cora's aunts warns her about the Hungry Ghost Festival and that she needs to burn joss paper and leave out food because, her sister had passed away, so she should definitely make sure to make offerings for that, and she doesn't want to attract that kind of negativity and ghosts. And then Cora just kind of doesn't really believe in it, so she brushes it off. But then weird stuff starts happening. Food disappears from her fridge. She finds bite marks on her coffee table. Then she starts seeing the ghosts and she starts freaking out. So you got that happening too. It's a crazy book and it's really freaking good. I like that one a lot. There's a really great horror this month. All right, after that, I read a thriller called The Last Session by Julia Bartz. Picked this one up because I really liked her other thriller that I'd read prior called The Writing Retreat. Thought that was really good. This one is about a sex cult. So it follows this art therapy teacher named Thea. Thea works in a psych ward. One day a Jane Doe comes in. Jane Doe is mute. They found her wandering around the expressway. She won't do anything for herself. They have to dress her and help her do everything. And Thea's wondering why this woman looks so frickin' familiar. She realizes that this woman was an actress that used to be in this movie that she watched all the time that she was obsessed with when she was a kid called Stargirl. Eventually the woman comes out of her whatever catatonic state that she was in, and her and Thea start talking, and they finally have this kind of connection to each other. But then some weird stuff ends up happening because the woman, the actress, is supposed to be released and her parents are supposed to come pick her up. So parents come pick her up, but it turns out they weren't her parents because her parents showed up after and they're like, what the F? So it seems like maybe she was kidnapped. But then Thea finds this weird note in her crayon box that was like, hey, thanks for letting me listen to those podcasts on your phone. And she's like, I didn't let you listen to podcasts on my phone. That was the other lady that works here. And she's like, is she trying to send me a weird message? So she listens to the podcast and it's this couple, Moon and Soul. They do a weird relationship therapy healing retreat out in New Mexico. And in the episode, they talk about that woman, the actress, Catherine, and she's like, okay, I think this is where she ended up going. And they're having a retreat that's coming up. So she signs up to go to this retreat, spends a bunch of money to go see if she can find this woman and help her. And when she gets there, she finds out it's a freaking sex cult. There's all kinds of weird stuff happening. I had a lot of fun reading that book. After that, I read a mystery, and that was How to Seal Your Own Fate by Kristen Parent. This is the second book in the Castle Knoll mysteries. The first one was How to Solve Your Own Murder, which I freaking loved. It was such a good mystery. This one also really good too. It gets more into the story and you kind of flash between back prior to when her aunt owned this estate and then the main character Annie, because the prior book, How to Solve Your Own Murder, her aunt, Frances, when she was 17, went to a fortune teller, and the fortune teller had told her she would be murdered. Thanks, fortune teller. And so her whole life, her Aunt Frances was like trying to figure out who was going to kill her. So she had all these files and information gathered on all these different people. And she didn't end up being murdered till she was in her 70s. So she had to deal with this for a really long freaking time. Okay, so in the next book, you have this fortune teller approach Annie, and it was the same fortune teller who told Frances that she was going to be murdered. And she's like, hey, you need to look into this Olivia Gravestone woman because I think that she was murdered and you still have access to Frances's old files, this, that, and the other. And I also have a fortune for you. And Annie's like, I don't want to hear your fortune for me, but yeah, I'll look into the Olivia Gravestone thing because supposedly the Olivia had died in a car accident with her husband and the husband's father, but Peony is saying, oh, hey, we think it was murder. So you have that. And then Peony Lane ends up being found murdered shortly thereafter with a dagger in her back inside of Annie's house. And that just kicks off the thing. So you have flashbacks to like Frances too, because a lot of that with the Olivia Gravestone and stuff like that was in her time frame. So you have Frances had been trying to find out stuff about the family and this, that, and the other. This was before she ended up marrying into the Gravestone family. So you have like flashbacks from that time, and then you have the present day, and then it meshes really well. And the mystery was a really good mystery, and I highly enjoyed it. I don't read enough mysteries. I read them very few and far between, but that one was super fun. Okay, after that, may just be my favorite book this month, and that is When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. This book is so good. It's a horror book, kind of a werewolf book, but it's so much more. It's like werewolf, but like X-Files werewolf with weird kind of psychic activity stuff going on. So there's this kid. His dad, when he gets really angry, seems to transform into a creature of some sort, and the boy runs away one day. And this woman, Jess, finds him, takes him in. He's in her apartment. He seems freaked out, talking about his dad is really mad. And so it seems like this kid's been in an abusive situation. There's a lot of trauma. So Jess, like, covers him up on the couch. They had eaten some pizza. Later in the night, there's like a commotion outside and she hears like people and she goes outside and she sees the weird neighbor and his girlfriend are like kind of in a verbal confrontation with this naked guy. And well, the naked guy might just be the kid's father. And all of a sudden the kid's looking out the door wall of the sliding door. And the kid he sees the kid and then just starts like backing away and goes in there and like closes the curtain. And then all of a sudden like weird noises start to happen and then the screams happen and weird ripping wet noises. The cops get called. Her roommate comes out with her gun and the crap hits the fan because all of a sudden there's this weird creature there that is kind of like a wolf or a bear or something. And people start dying, and then eventually Jess takes off with the kid, and they start trying to escape. And then the father, who's very angry, seems to come after them. And he might not be quite human. But at first, Jess doesn't put two and two together, and she thinks that the father probably died after the whole crazy thing with this creature that came and like murdered everything and everyone. And that chaos and carnage kind of follows them as they try to outrun the wolf or the dad. And it's freaking crazy and off the rails, and it's so much more. It's so weird, like X-Files stuff happening. I will be having a standalone review for this one coming, so I'll have more to say on that part. So let's tell you what my top three favorite out of all these. Number one was this one, When the Wolf Comes Home. Amazing. Number two, I think was Harriet Tubman live in concert. That book's so freaking good. And number three is Palibius by Colin Armstrong. Like the 80s creepy arcade game, A Town Gone Mad. So what have been some of your favorite books that you've read this month so far? Let me know down in the comments because I'm always curious to see what you guys are enjoying and whatnot. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.